time. Hey everybody, happy Wednesday again. It's December 13th. This is the TED Show, and I'm with my friend, my guest, who's gonna actually have to put up with me for the next 25 minutes or so, Dan Eckhart. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you, Ted.
Let us know that you guys can hear us and see us because we're in a different spot than we were earlier, and I want to make sure that the microphone's on and that you can actually see Dan with his full head of hair that he has at his age, which is crazy. But welcome to the show, man.
Well, thank you.
I'm very excited to have you. I love the title of the show. So hold on, I want to make sure that we're on. Guys, let me know if you can hear us. I love the title of the show, Lawyers, Guns, and Money, right? And that came from something else. Tell them. Because I love that. I'm fascinated by you, and we'll get into why. David, let us know you can hear us. But I think that what you do and your practice that you've built and what you work on is just amazing, because I am a kind of a legal junkie, so to speak. But give us a background. Give us the Lawyers, Guns, and Money first, and then give us your background.
Well, Lawyers, Guns, and Money, it's a Warren Zevon song from, I think, the 70s.
Were you born then?
I was born in the 60s, but
Me too.
yeah, it's a 70s song, and I had a professor, actually an undergrad, that used to reference it in one of the classes, a criminal justice class, and I just always have thought about it. But yeah, I mean, it does resonate with what I do, because I do criminal defense now. I was a federal prosecutor for a number of years, and going way back, started off as an intern with the Treasury Department back in the 80s. Went to Michigan State and had a really good criminal justice program. Didn't really know too much about U.S. Customs, but U.S. Customs had opportunities in Washington, D.C. when Customs was under the Treasury Department back then.
Did you always know you wanted to be an attorney?
That's a good question, because I did. That was the kind of the dream for me, and it started at a young age. I had some inspiration. Nobody in my family had went to college. In my immediate family, I have a very distant relative who was one of the first female attorneys in the state of Michigan, and it was actually my grandfather's great aunt. My grandfather was a factory worker, so when I was growing up, he spent a lot of time telling me we had this great relative that was this amazing individual. She taught on Indian reservations before she went to law school. She was a really innovative person back in the 1900s. And I've got a reference to her on my website, and I've done some research in the past year or so looking into her background and found some news articles and everything else. But so that was kind of inspiration. My grandfather was somebody who didn't go to college, hardworking guy, worked in a factory. Everybody in my family kind of was blue collar, and it instilled in me education. And I started really thinking that being a lawyer would be something that I would be good at. And back in the early 1970s. Lawyers were not a dime a dozen like they are now, so it was much
We
more,
were talking about that. It's
much more prestigious
type
career. But with that being said, that was where I was going. That's went to Michigan State. I was going to do was a criminal justice major, but my intention was to go immediately to law school. The internship thing just kind of fell in my lap. I had a professor that was a former Michigan State trooper. Started talking to him and about some other things, and he said, you should look at this internship. And again, not knowing anything about customs, because Lansing, Michigan, where I'm from, is landlocked.
Right.
And
yeah, were you going to come over from Wisconsin?
Yeah, and I didn't do much international travel at that age, or none, so I didn't really get it. And somebody had said, those are the people that work in the airports with uniforms, and I was a special agent, which is different. Special agent, I had longer hair than I have now, and worked with sources of information.
You were a special agent. Yeah. I love that. Did you have a badge that said that?
Yeah. Still have cool. In fact, I don't have anything with me.
You should have brought that as a prop. If I had known, I would have asked you.
Yeah, I was one of the youngest agents in the country at that point. I just turned 22, and I was 21 when I got the job offer, and I was stationed out in San Francisco. So back then, customs was almost like Miami Vice. We had go fast boats. We had Black Hawk helicopters. We had all these a lot of money.
TV shows. It's back to the TV shows.
Yeah,
again.
Back to the TV shows. So it was a really looking back, I was really lucky to get the job in a lot of ways. A little too immature to appreciate it. And I was in San Francisco. The cost of living was crazy. I lived
it's still crazy.
4 other people in the 1980s. It was still bad. In fact, my first supervisor sat me and another agent down who was younger and told us that we qualified for food stamps in San Francisco. We didn't believe him, but he gave us.
I didn't even know they had food stamps.
He gave us the paperwork. So I mean, that's really kind of how things started.
Customs must have changed. I know you got out of it, especially after 9/11.
That's a good point. 9/11 was. actually kind of the death knell for the old Customs Service, because prior to 9/11, U.S. Customs had tremendous jurisdiction. They had expertise going back into the 1700s. It's the oldest law enforcement agency in the United States. And so what I did, and what a lot of the experienced customs agents did, is they did money laundering cases. A lot of times
there's the money, babies.
There's
the money in the title.
They were linked to drug activity back then, but it was money laundering. That was customs expertise. In fact, there was a movie made just a couple of years ago. Didn't do well at the box office, called The Infiltrator. And it's a true story about an agent in Tampa. His name was Bob Mazer. And he was the first case agent to actually launder money for the Colombian drug cartels back in the 80s. And when I was a young agent, he was legendary, because I was an agent, heard of this guy's in Tampa, and he's doing all these incredible things throughout the world. And we used to pick up money as part of his investigation. We'd have informants go and meet somebody at a fancy place like the Citrus Club. Not the Citrus Club.
It's really not. It's totally fancy.
and pick up money that was laundered from some of the drug cartels. And so it was kind of cool.
Wasn't that dangerous, though? So we talked about this. So I asked you why you have no social media presence, and I know there's a whole bunch of stories I want to get. I want to get some of the really down and dirty stories that you have. But dealing with money laundering and being a prosecutor, which you eventually got to, you have to be, or had to be, very careful.
Yeah, it was a choice that I made, and a lot of prosecutors that I know, right now, I'm still friends with a lot of prosecutors, and they have no social media presence for that reason. They don't have Facebook, they have nothing, they don't have LinkedIn. If they do have LinkedIn, it's just very professional. And the reason for that is, right or wrong, and it's probably a misconception, because I kind of believe now, or have come to the belief that if they really want to reach out and touch you, they can touch you. They can find you.
They can find you anywhere.
But it was just something I was uncomfortable with because of my family. I didn't really want to be on Facebook and all these other platforms. Now I'm a solo attorney now. I've been out for the last 9 months, and so now I've kind of had to force myself. I've got a pretty good LinkedIn presence.
You do. You've got a great LinkedIn presence, and Rena's trying to help you with the rest of it.
Yeah, you mentioned Rena. Rena Walensky is my longtime girlfriend.
We love Rena.
3 years now, Rena, if she's out there. She's been a huge supporter of me, along with my family and some of the other attorneys here in the community, Mark E. James, David Haas. I mean, it's been a really great experience. I'm really happy that I'm out there on my own.
So but before you went out on your own, let's talk about what you did in between, because you had a lot of very cool cases, which is probably where the guns are coming in. I'm not sure where that's going to come in. We're going to talk about that. Yeah. You have some amazing stories. One of the things I loved because we met at the Citrus Club, one of the things I loved was listening to your stories, because I'm a big legal junkie as far as TV goes, and I love all the cases. I love the intricacy of it. And a lot of times on this side of that, you think, wow, that's good for TV, but it doesn't really happen. But in reality, it's probably more crazy than we're led to believe, because on TV it all has this lovely little wrapped up happy ending.
Yeah, that's probably true. I have a hard time with a lot of the television shows and a lot of the movies, because they give the impression, which is totally wrong, that the government has all this amazing technology and there's all this communication and coordination between the agencies, and
right.
in reality it's just not like that. I'm not saying that there aren't resources with the federal government, with law enforcement, military, but day to day, a lot of times they're not utilized. There's just not that communication. And what it comes down to make a good case, whether you're a prosecutor or an agent, it's just dedication. It's dedication and hard work. It's teamwork. I kind of jumped around a little bit, but after I was an agent, I decided to go to law school, and I was an agent. I was with Customs for 3 years, and went to law school, and then had every intention of the world of getting into the U.S. Attorney's Office immediately. Little did I know that was a pipe dream. I didn't have any experience. I was young, so I ended up with the Federal Bureau of Prisons as an attorney, not as an inmate. I always tell people that. So
allegedly.
So I was with the Federal Bureau of Prisons for about 10 years. And you want to talk about some characters and some stories. It was pretty amazing.
What do you do if you're an attorney or legal counsel for the Federal Bureau of Prisons? Well, I didn't even know we had a Federal Bureau of Prisons.
Yeah, we do. That's where the federal inmates spend their time for the most part.
Is that like Club Fed? Is that what they used to call it?
Yeah, that's a misnomer. There's different levels of security, and there is federal prison camps, which is what people refer to as Club Fed. That's a lot of times white collar, non-violent. But there's other security levels. You have low security, which means there's a fence around the institution. Usually a perimeter patrol. It's a guy rolling around with an AR-15, but otherwise there's no towers with snipers. And you go to a medium security, that's a little bit more robust. You still have a perimeter. more conditions that are restricted for the inmates as far as their movement, and then finally you have U.S. penitentiaries. Penitentiaries are the most secure. You have big walls, you've got gun towers, you've got
who goes there? What type of inmates or crimes do they commit?
A lot of times, most of the time it's somebody with a violent history or violent past, or they're convicted of violent federal offense. It could be a gun offense or drug trafficking, carjacking, something that involves not only violence but involves a lot of time. So you could, for instance, our white collar criminals ended up in the penitentiary because they're such an escape risk. We had in this district before I became a prosecutor here, but there was something that I was familiar with. There was, I think it was Falcone was an inmate that was eventually convicted out of Miami. Falcone and Magluta were the two inmates, and they're convicted, and they may be dead by now, but they were involved in a big cartel case, and they were at such a level that the intelligence to the United States, and I was at the Bureau of Prisons, so I was in on this, was that they had the resources to hire mercenaries, and they were hiring mercenaries throughout the world to try to break them out of the facility in Miami.
Oh, so they were you see that on TV though.
Yeah, you do see
that on TV a lot.
But it didn't happen, because what happened is, because it's a system of snitches, which I might get to in this presentation.
You should.
The word got out, and the Bureau of Prisons transferred our dear friends from Miami all the way to, I think it was Marion, where they're in pretrial status, which was unprecedented before 9/11 to have somebody in that secure for pretrial, because they weren't convicted. So, there are different security levels. The most secure prison is the Supermax, which is in Colorado, Florence, Colorado. It's the ADX, which is administrative.
What do they have to do to get in there? See, I went on the dirt.
Well, mostly you have to you've killed somebody. You've had to, or it could be somebody that's got terrorist affiliations or a crime that involves terrorism.
So, because it's fascinating to me, because obviously I should know this after watching all the shows.
Yeah.
But you've got federal, so somebody could kill someone here, for example. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go to a federal prison.
No,
you have to break a federal law.
Right. It depends. It depends which jurisdiction picks them up. If you're a state offender, you're going to do time in one of the state jurisdictions. If you're a federal offender, you're going to do time in a federal institution. So there are a lot of crimes in the federal code that are violent. So you do have places where you got to put violent people.
And what did you do? So let's get back to what you did for the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
Yeah, Federal Bureau of Prisons, I represented the wardens and the staff against the inmates, and so we would have mostly civil claims, and there were some criminal work that I did, but mostly civil claims. The inmates would file just a number of different claims against inmates, excessive force. We had claims for medical malpractice. One of the things, constitutional deprivations. Religion becomes very important to people once they get in prison.
Right.
And so
So you were on the defense side of defending the government.
Government, yeah, it was always government. And it provided legal advice to the wardens about things that they could do for security measures they would take. And a lot of it is very policy oriented. The Bureau of Prisons is almost like the military. Everything is found in a post order or found in a procedure that you're supposed to follow. So a huge percentage of the time, you know what the answer is, but then there's that gray area where you have to have an attorney present. And the better wardens, in my opinion, relied on the legal staff. Some of the wardens were old school, and they're like, we never had attorneys when I started. I don't need you.
If you watch TV, though, all wardens and security officers are corrupt, right? So that's what they want you to believe.
Yeah, and they're not. I mean,
it's
not. And the BOP, it's the acronym for Bureau of Prisons, is actually very good at what they do. Don't find themselves in the funny papers that often, and really hire really talented people for the most part. I mean, there's exceptions, obviously.
Well, I mean, when you have that much power, there's going to be corruption anywhere, but the TV tends to make it seem like it's so much more than it probably really is.
Right, and that's and part of what makes TV impossible and makes some of the scenarios impossible. I mentioned this phrase, it's a system of snitches. Well, that's how not only the federal government works, but the state law enforcement. Some of the things that happen on television just could not happen because there's so much incentive for somebody with knowledge to blow the whistle.
Right.
Whistleblower cases, which I handle now that I'm in private practice. Or just tell somebody because it's on their conscience and they feel bad about it.
What system of snitches? So go more into that. That's somebody who's going to, well, you said whistleblower, so somebody's going to tell on whoever is not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. In the context of the work environment, such as a company or the government or corporation, there are whistleblowing cases are becoming more prevalent, and it's a mechanism for the federal government and for private entities to ferret out fraud, misconduct, crime. And there's an incentive, particularly with the federal government. The state government also has state whistleblower cases. usually you get a cut or a percentage of the recovery. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I've got one now filed. I can't get the details. I've got one filed here in the Middle District of Florida. I've got two other ones.
The person who's whistleblowing is not only they're being protected because they have an attorney, but they'll get a percentage of whatever is recovered.
Right, and the way the federal system works, what you do is you file everything under seal. It's my old office, it's the U.S. Attorney's offices and the Department of Justice. They're responsible for evaluating the case. And if they say, Ted, we like your case, you found this fraud that involves whatever defense contractor or whatever healthcare provider, we're going to take the case and now we're going to partner up. And so the heavy lifting is done now by the FBI and by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and you're there. So they're very, but it's a very helpful statute, to be honest with you.
So how are I've got to ask this, and then we'll get back to legal. But I've got some really cool questions in my mind that I want answered. How are the prison systems as bad as they're portrayed to be? Is it as dangerous and life-threatening? And do the inmates actually run everything?
My knowledge of that is, again, limited to the federal system. I've been into state institutions, and I can tell you, not to generalize, but I will. The state institutions are not nearly as good as the federal institutions, just because of the resources. You have better, the pay is better in the federal system. The resources, the infrastructure, everything is much better. The regulation is much better. So to answer your question, you would much rather do time in a federal institution, but they're not. The horror stories that you see about, I'm going to go to prison, I'm going to be raped in the shower the first day.
I don't want to be Mrs. Anybody. So that's always my thing.
Yeah,
I don't want to commit a crime because I don't want to be Mrs. Anybody.
Look, it happens so infrequently, and when it does happen, it's going to be in a higher security institution. I've got a friend right now, and I won't name him. I have a close personal friend from high school who's doing time up at a camp in Duluth, Minnesota. And I've got another inmate.
Being in Duluth sounds like that would be part of the prison. No offense, Minnesota.
Actually, I think he's pretty cold right now. But I've got another person that has hired me to consult with them, who's a very, very wealthy individual that's doing time in a camp. And there's that apprehension or that fear because you're not exposed to it. You see the television shows, you think, oh my God, I'm going to a camp. The camp is, the reality is you're going to be with guys like, not Ted, but guys that look like Ted and look like me. It's going to be people that are ex-professionals. A lot of times it's going to be low-level drug dealers. It's going to be people that are not involved in violent criminal activity in the camps and the low security. Once you start to bump up into the medium, you're going to have more violence. And obviously the penitentiary, there's some dangerous people in the penitentiary.
So you dealt with, we should have put lawyers, guns, money, and drugs, because I want to talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely.
So you dealt with drug dealers. So what is your thought process, and I haven't prepped him at all. Remember, we have $2.35 R&D that we do on the show. What's your thought process on the prison system being filled with low-level drug dealers or people who have been convicted of marijuana possession? I mean, is it because you can, I'm sorry, in this day and age, it's very hard to get through what's real and what isn't on the media, and all the media, it's so one-sided, it seems like, depending on whatever side you're on. So what's the reality of that? Is that really bottlenecking the system, and are there people who are serving 30 years for their third marijuana possession? That's the stuff that gets put out there, and I'd love to get your input.
Right. Yeah. Well, just big picture wise, I've experienced quite a transition in my personal beliefs, and not even recently. I mean, this happened years ago. I started off in the 80s, and I did marijuana cases. I mean, I've arrested people for marijuana all the time. I was in the Northern District of California, and one of the things that they saw is marijuana being exported from the United States, because I'm not a weed smoker, but some of the best weed in the world is grown in Humboldt County. So went from doing that to going to law school, worked for the Bureau of Prisons, and I did start to see some of these people that were doing significant sentences for nonviolent drug convictions, and I think the politicians and the judges and everybody else have kind of seen that, and so you're not seeing as much. There's been a lot of legislation as far as the crack cocaine, disparity between the powder and the crack, and that has been acted upon. And marijuana, I mean, now with the legalization throughout the country, both for recreational and for medicinal purposes, I don't know of any U.S. Attorney's offices doing any marijuana cases unless it's a very significant amount. And I could see that now when it does become, and I'm one of these people. I think it's in my lifetime. I think it's going to be completely legal and regularized.
I agree.
I just think, and I have no issues with that.
Me either.
Not at all. And I think our resources, which ties into Ted's question, I came to the mindset, probably at some point when I started with the U.S. Attorney's Office, that we should be, spending a lot more of our resources fighting violent criminals, obviously terrorism, which the FBI is doing a good job of now. That's really where our money should be spent.
It just seems to me like such a waste of resources to spend all of that time convicting someone of their first, second, third offense of possession, and a non-violent crime especially. It just seemed like it was so interesting because I was in the field, the alcohol, drug abuse, and mental health field for so long. And I remember back in the day, the mindset was, oh my God, marijuana is the gateway drug, and everybody's going to start smoking crack as soon as you take your first hit of marijuana. And they totally criminalized it in everyone's mind. But thankfully, we've got a lot of very strong-willed proponents of being able to legalize marijuana, and that has pushed through, which I'm very happy about. I'm also not a weed smoker. I just feel like it's natural. Just do it. If it's helping. I had a guest on, Trisha Dennis, and her son has schizencephaly, and it has helped reduce his tremors 90+%, and that's not the exact one, Trisha, but you'll correct me. If it's helping a kid do that, why would we make it hard to get to? So I love that. So anyway, I'm off on a tangent. So tell us some of the fun, some of the interesting cases. And I do want to talk about Rena's case a little bit. You can start there if you want, or you can talk about the other cases. Maybe
she could go on her own. Let me talk about my stuff.
Talk about your... Rena, that's how it is. You're going to watch this later? Because I haven't seen her come... She could be on. I can't see everybody.
Yeah, the interesting cases,
Awesome.
a pretty expansive career. It's 20 years of the Justice Department, 3 years of Treasury. And so during that time, different functions. Here at the U.S. Attorney's Office in this district, I'll tell you, you've got a lot of talented. You still have, there's been some turnover, but I mean, these jobs, working as a federal prosecutor, are some of the best jobs in the country. And so you have some of the best, most talented, most motivated people that you'll ever meet, and you work with them. The camaraderie is amazing. And with that, you had leadership, at least when I was there. Our U.S. Attorney took the position when he got in, Bobby O'Neill. Bobby's down in Miami now, working for the Louis Free Group, which does investigations, like high-end investigations. But took the mindset that if there's any nexus to Central Florida, go out and get it. So I did a lot of cases, did a lot of international cases. I did cases in Brazil, Amsterdam, Ireland. These are all separate cases. I went down to Mexico 4 times and did a big cartel case.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
cartel?
All money laundering type investigations. So you'd have some type of activity in the Central District, Central Florida, Middle District of Florida, that involves some foreign criminal activity. The case in just off the top of my head, the case in Ireland involved prostitution. You had worked with the Irish National Police. You had a prostitution ring in Ireland that was laundering the proceeds of their illegal prostitution and some human trafficking. Here in Florida, they were buying commercial and residential real estate. So we did some seizures and took some bank accounts that way. But
human trafficking was that part of almost every case?
Not exactly then. It was it wasn't, at least in my experience. I didn't do really any human trafficking cases. We did have them in the office, but I think it's a lot more prevalent, particularly in this market. I mean, you've got the attractions here. You've got a lot of industry here that lends itself to that.
Well, we're third in the nation, I think, statewide.
Right.
And then I don't know where Orlando. I should know this because I serve on a couple of human trafficking boards. Orlando is it's a hot spot for it.
Right.
I mean, all the tourist stuff you don't really question when people are coming into town what's going on.
Yeah, it's something that I think that both the state and the feds have recognized and have taken action and educated the public, and you see those cases. I didn't really do those as much as I did the money cases, and money laundering 101. I mean, essentially what you have is proceeds of some type of criminal activity being put into another form, or being put into a bank account, or invested in some manner. And with the Mexican cases, the cartels were throughout the country, not here just in Orlando, but they'll pick and choose places where there's not the law enforcement presence. And we just got lucky enough that we had an informant that was able to convince a representative of one of the cartels to open up a bank account here with a bank, and then from there decided to try to transfer the money to a financial advisor that we controlled. And so we laundered money helped monitor the money laundering for a couple of years. And I went down to Mexico, worked with the Mexican prosecutors. And the way they do those international cases is they vet the units. because there is so much corruption in Mexico. So they've got the prosecutors. The prosecutors a lot of times are required to take.
So that part's true.
Yeah, the prosecutors are required to take polygraphs, and so are the agents that you're working with down there and the police. And it's pretty, at least it was very interesting because they engage the military a lot with their criminal investigations. Right or wrong, the military is involved with.
How did you feel going to those countries knowing? I mean, that's got to have
some
sort of, oh my God, I'm not really safe.
Yeah, well,
back to the let's not have presence all over social media.
I'd say that was one of the handful of times I've been scared, and I've been scared. I've been in my work, and there was one time when it was like my first trip to Mexico, and one of the agents is still here at Orlando working Homeland Security, and I had not been down before for one of these cases. I think it was my first trip, literally, and we got in early, and the first indication that I had is when we came to the airport and the local FBI and customs or Homeland Security guys pick us up. We're walking through a different way through the airport, and I go, wow, this is great. They're not going to know we're here. And they laughed and said, no, everybody knows you're here.
They know, yeah.
And then I wanted to stay in a hotel which was a mile from the embassy, and was told, hell no. And I said, well, the per diem's the same. It's not anymore. No, you're staying right next to the embassy. So we stayed at the Sheraton and literally walked 20 yards, never been down there, 25 yards to the embassy.
That's scary.
And we went to a place that night, just me and the other agent, which in hindsight was probably not the most secure.
The smartest thing you should have done.
He was armed, and I felt good about it. And these other agents were supposed to be there within, getting out of the hotel. Hey, I'll meet you in the lobby. We'll go, whatever. So we found ourselves sitting at a table with Scarface next to us. And it was crazy.
Scary.
And the guy, just out of the movies.
Do you think he knew who you were?
They approached us several times. He sent his guys over.
Because their intel is really, people underestimate it. That's one thing I don't think that gets exaggerated on any show. The intel that people have access to is pretty amazing.
Yeah, particularly with the computer, the hacks now with the emails and things. It's in social media. People, they're just so careless, and there's so many opportunities with the email compromises.
Right. They seem like they're everywhere now.
Yeah. And
talk about your business, because we're going to go over a little, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, because I'm fascinated by what you do. So talk about your private practice now. That's 9 months in.
Yeah, 9 months in, and what I did is
it's a big leap.
Did all that time with the government, and I was at the bank for 3 years. Seaside Bank here in Orlando. It was a great bank to work for, but I came to the conclusion that I probably needed to be doing something else that really was more in line with my background. And so I went out on my own 9 months ago and just went solo. And I do criminal defense. Like I said, I do whistleblower cases. I've got those. I actually represent victims of investment fraud. And I've had a couple of those. It runs the gamut. I really like it. I've been very lucky to get the referrals I've gotten the last year and got some really interesting cases.
Well, yeah, but your background allows that. All of your experience, obviously, that you've had successes and you've got a steady, strong background, because those cases are complicated.
Yes, they are, and that was something that Ted and I shared too. That it's opened my eyes up quite a bit. Just in the past 9 months, there's a lot of imposters out there, and I hate to disparage other attorneys, but there are just so many attorneys out there that
it's scary.
I do most of my work in federal court. I also do higher end state court cases, but there's people that find themselves, with a client across them, and they'll represent to them, hey, I know what I'm doing, and they'll take the guy's money and make promises to him as far as the outcome, and it just doesn't work that way. So it's really sad, but I've been able to help a couple of those, and one plug in the latest thing, and everything's been going really well, and I again shared this with Ted, is just last week the planets all lined up, and I've been doing this do a virtual office, and it's worked out really well. But I thought, well, I'm going to move into an office sometime in 2018, and there's an attorney here in town, Fritz Scheller, who I knew, on the other side. He's a former federal public defender, very, very, very accomplished, federal criminal attorney. He had office space. We met, and so now it's a bromance. I just moved in a couple days ago. And his hair's longer than mine, so I fit really.
Jeez. Yeah, you and the hair, man.
No, the hair.
Your signature.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. I had a flat top and short hair throughout my career, and I finally decided just to let it go.
That out. But you don't have any social media, so how would I find it? Should ask Rena to look at those.
Yeah. So, but it's been good. To answer your question, it's been good, and I'm really happy that I made the move, and I don't see any. I could never work for anybody now. I hate to say that. I've done this.
It's so difficult to go back to that, and I think that we were talking about passion and dreams earlier with Jake Romeo, who's 19.
Oh wow!
But you follow it, and most people who've got that desire, they're afraid to follow it, and they're afraid to make the leap. And it is easier, I think, if you have this guarantee of working for someone else and everybody else is taking care of stuff. When you become the sole proprietor, you're the owner, it's a different feel, but it's worth for me anyway, it was worth that because it gave me so much flexibility. It allowed me to do what I want to do. When I want to do it, you get to take the cases you want to take, and you don't have to be, you're not told what to take, which is awesome because then you get to pick and choose. You're in control of your destiny.
Yeah, what it's done for me, not to get too philosophical, but I think about this a lot now, is, you know, the concept of freedom. I mean, yeah, we have freedom of speech and all these different things that we have in this country, but the one thing that I never understood, and I kind of rereading some of the, you know, to be honest with you, the Constitution, they talk about freedom. A lot of those people didn't work for anybody. You know, if you think about it, they had the kind of existence that you have and I have, where they did their own thing and they didn't want to be, you know, anchored to anybody. And so I kind of wanted the light bulb. I didn't hear anybody say this, but I think, man, that's what they're talking about.
Correct.
It's just a whole different journey for me. I'm really happy that I've got this opportunity.
I'm excited for you, and I thank you for being on the show. Like, I could talk to you for hours and ask you a lot of crazy questions. My kids are all, they actually got me hooked on some of the shows, and I hate to keep going back to that, but some of those cases I know are based on real stuff, so there is some crazy stuff out there, and I've heard some of his stories. Rena, you're going to have to come on the show and tell your story,
you can find me online, you can call me. I'm very,
oh, yes, what's your we're going to put your URL at the end.
Yeah, okay.
What's your URL?
Yeah, it's Eckhart.law.com.
Okay, so we'll post that. Thanks for being on, buddy. I appreciate
thanks
it.
again.
You guys were awesome. Thank you. If you have questions for Dan, reach out to him. You can also post once I finish the video and ask him questions. I'll have to get them to him because he's not on Facebook, but we'll make sure that he sees them and he gets back to you. It was a great show. You did an amazing job. Very fascinating. All right, so you guys have a great day.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for joining us.
All right.
And here's my part.